this evening? Any executive sessions for public building? No. Approval of prior minutes, August the 12th, 2019. Any changes? None. Stand approved as presented. Consideration of accounts payable. Mr. Project Manager.
Mr. President, there is one account payable this evening. It is to pay your audit bill.
And do we have a motion to approve that?
I'd make a motion to approve to pay the audit bill.
Second that.
No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Project Manager report.
I have no report this evening.
No executive sessions. We will adjourn at probably 5:01. We will adjourn at 5:01. Ready again, Mike? We'll go ahead and call the Ellis County Commission meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Donna, please note that none of my fellow commissioners have left the building. Any changes to the order of business this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The Conservation District has a request that they would like to make of the Commission and would propose that you add them on between items 7 and 8.
Okay. Any other changes, Commissioners?
No.
None? There are no prior minutes to be approved. There are still some changes being made. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through G.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through G.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries 3-0, Donna. Issues from persons not on the order of business this evening. Do we have anyone? Monthly financial report, Commissioners?
Had no issues with it.
Dustin?
Everything seemed fine on
None?
it to me.
Introduction of financial advisor Larry Kleeman, Ransom Financial.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Larry Kleeman with Ransom Financial. As you recall, you just entered into a financial advisory agreement a month or two ago. We're based out of Wichita. Just wanted to stop by to say hi to you guys. I'm actually a Western Kansas native myself. I can't remember if I told Phil this, but yeah, originally from Southwest Kansas, in Kearney County, wheat farm north of Lakin. But we've been serving as financial advisor to cities, counties, schools, all kinds of local governments all around the state. And we're comprehensive, so we help you not only issue bonds, we help you do CIP planning, analysis, continuing disclosure, and so forth. So been chatting with Phil over the past few months about potential projects and running numbers and getting your continuing disclosure up to date, which is important for when you issue bonds. So I'm basically here at your and Phil's disposal to assist with anything we can help with. So look forward to working with you guys. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll see you in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks,
Any
guys.
questions for him?
No questions.
No, thank you.
None? Thank you for stopping in.
You bet.
Next item, legislator update. State Representative Mr. Troy Waymaster, 109th District. Welcome, Troy.
Well, thank you for having me and inviting me a couple weeks ago when we were at the meeting in Colby with the other county commissioners from Western Kansas. As Chairman Hazelhorst mentioned, I'm the representative for the 109th Kansas House District, which includes a total of 7 counties, the entire counties of Russell, Osborne, and Smith, and portions of Jewell, Lincoln, Barton, and Rush. So I have a pretty large swath of central Kansas that I've been representing. This next legislative session will be 8 years that I've been in the legislature. Right now, I'm the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which is the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives. I've been doing that. This next session will be my 4th year being chairman. So I was just going to kind of talk about exactly where the state finances are. I also serve as a member of many different committees. I'm also on the Transportation Task Force Committee, which right now we have a meeting on Thursday in Topeka, and what we're trying to do is to craft a new 10-year transportation plan for the future of transportation throughout the state of Kansas. Right now, that plan is looking to cost anywhere from about $1.3 billion to $1.7 billion over the next 10 years when this plan is implemented. And so we're trying to, when we did the consults throughout the state last year, we had $18 billion worth of requests from all the local entities that breached or that spoke to the task force. And so now we have to go back and identify which projects are needed and what ones we were able to fund. As you're aware, there are some projects from the T-Works program that we were not able to fulfill. So we've got to implement those into the new transportation plan as well. So it's bridging the gap of what didn't happen in T-Works to what's going to happen with Forward Kansas, which is the new title of the transportation plan. So we're having a meeting on Thursday, and we're going to probably try to have something crafted for the 2020 legislative session so we can get that passed. I'm also a member of the State Finance Council, which is actually chaired by the governor. And basically, we address any financial matters for the state of Kansas outside of the legislative session, so that way the day-to-day business of the state can move forward when the legislators are not in Topeka full-time. I'm also a member for the 2nd year in a row on the Hemp Advisory Committee. We've been meeting with the Department of Ag and rolling out first what was passed in 2018 with the Industrial Hemp Research Project, and then now we're trying to implement that and carry that through to the commercial hemp project as well. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about exactly where the budget is at. We ended fiscal year 2019 in a relatively healthy position. There are many factors that played into the rationale as to why we ended in such a positive ending balance, but actually it was the largest ending balance that the state of it has seen in its history. We ended with $1.1 billion ending balance in fiscal year 2019. Now, there were a lot of things that accounted for that, namely one of the tax bills that was going through the last 2 legislative sessions after the federal tax laws changed. We did not decouple from the federal tax code, which we are only one of 7 states that have not done that. So that brought in extra revenue when Kansans went in and filed their individual tax returns. That was probably about $300 million that we were trying to give back to the taxpayers. However, in the 2018 legislative session, that failed. There were not enough votes to pass it out of the House. I voted in favor of it. And then this last year, we also voted and passed the House and the Senate and vetoed by the governor, and then we were not able to sustain a veto override. So that added to the ending balance that we had for the state of Kansas. So we had, in fiscal year 2019, we had total revenue of about $8.1 billion. And then we had adjusted expenditures of just over $7 billion. Now, one thing that you have to account in that is that we still have delayed the transfer from the State General Fund to the Kansas Department of Transportation, which is approximately about $238 million. So that is sitting in that ending balance of $1.1 billion. We're trying to make changes to that, so that money goes back to the Kansas Department of Transportation so they can fulfill the new transportation plan that we're crafting right now. So that also it factors into the ending balance of $1.1 billion. Now, if you look at what we have for fiscal year 2020, and that was the budget bill that we passed this last legislative session, we have speculated revenue of about $8.5 billion, with expenditures roughly at 7.9. So our expenditures have gone up quite a bit. The main reasons why that has gone up is we were paying off a loan that we took out in 2017 when we found ourselves in a precarious situation when we had a deficit. So we took out a loan against what's called the Pool Money Investment Board. That was approximately $380 million. The initial intent was to pay that off over 5 years. We expedited that this last year with the revenues that we saw coming in. We wanted to pay off some of our debt. That's a 0% interest loan, so we went ahead and paid that off within 2 years. So that is one of the expenditures that is going up, is that payment increased quite a bit. The other is we had more money going into the Kansas Department of Transportation, and then also we have additional dollars that went into higher ed and then also in K through 12 education. So that is the main components as to why there is such a stark increase between 2019 and 2020. If you look at the ending balance of 2020, we're speculated to be at approximately $677 million as an ending balance. And then as you look at 21, 22, and 23, it starts to look a little dire. We have an ending balance in 21 of about $293 million. 2022, we're $83 million in the hole. And then expected in 2023, if we maintain our current spending levels and don't make any adjustments to revenues, we're looking at about a deficit of $497 million in 2023. So when we talk about the state general portion of the budget and where exactly does all that go, about 63% or out of the total state general fund allocation of the state budget, which the state budget is approximately $18 billion, but that includes all federal dollars and other types of revenues that come in that we disperse out into the various agencies. The state general portion is only about $7.7 billion of the 18. Education, so K through 12 and higher ed, is 63% of that. Approximately $4.8 billion is dedicated to K through 12 education and then higher ed. The next largest is human services, so all your Medicaid. We actually conducted a mental health tour, which we stopped in Hayes in the month of September. That would also fall into human services. That's about 26%, or just about $2 billion. General government budget is about 4%. So that's what funds the legislature, the agencies, the governor, and all that. Ag and natural resources is at 0.2%. So that's only $16 million of the state fund allocation goes to ag and natural resources. Public safety, so the correctional facilities and departments, is about $465 million, or 6% of the total budget. And then there's another of 0.1%, which is about $9.8 million that is also allocated as far as the state budget. When we're looking at the 2020 legislative session, there are many different pieces of items or issues that I foresee being prevalent when we go back to the legislative session. As one that I mentioned, and since I serve on the task force, is going to be that new transportation plan. We definitely need to make sure that our transportation infrastructure is up to date. We've been credited as being one of the best in the nation. Actually, I think a couple years ago we were ranked number 2. And so we want to make sure that we maintain the infrastructure that we currently have, and then also address the future needs for Kansas. That is going to be both in a metro and in a rural setting. Your metro areas of, say, Johnson County and Wichita have many projects because of the growth that they're seeing. But the one thing that we're trying to work out in our rural areas is using our right-of-way for broadband and put that in the highway system, because who knows what the future may bring. The U.S. Department of Transportation has wanted us to envision a plan that would take us to 2045. And we have no idea what the transportation needs are going to be of Kansans in 2045. We might have drones, we might have unmanned vehicles. So we need to have the infrastructure in place right now where broadband has that connectivity, so we can position ourselves to be prepared in 2045. The other committee that I didn't mention when I kind of had my introduction, and that's because we haven't met yet. We don't meet until the month of November, and that is a special committee on Medicaid expansion. the Speaker of the House asked me to serve on that committee. What's going to happen is the last 2 legislative sessions, the House has passed a Medicaid expansion bill. The Senate refused to take it up this last legislative session, and I don't know if many of you followed the procedures that went on the last few days of the 2019 legislative session, but basically the budget was held hostage until the Senate took a vote up on Medicaid expansion. Eventually there was I would say a deal cut with the moderate Republicans that were wanting to push Medicaid expansion on the Senate, and then the Senate leadership that they would have an interim committee in regards to Medicaid expansion. So that's what's going to be happening, is the Senate is drafting a version of their own for Medicaid expansion, and then when the Senate committee has that particular plan, then it is distributed to a joint committee between the House and the Senate, and that is the committee that I serve on. So that is going to be another big issue that is going to be topical in Topeka in the 2020 legislative session. I don't exactly know how it's going to move forward the process because the House, some members contend that we already have a version. We don't need a Senate version. The Senate version is, I've seen components out of it. It's starkly different than the House version. So I don't know if it's one of those cases where we vote on the Senate version after it passes out of the Senate, or if it goes to conference where we negotiate the 2 bills. It'll be kind of interesting to see exactly how that goes. The next issue that is going to be prevalent in the 2020 legislative session is that will be of taxes. Governor Kelly has put together a tax commission where they had been meeting a couple days during the break from the legislative session. And these are individuals who are legislators, former legislators, whatever the case may be, that she appointed to this task force. And they're going to be making basically a stated position to the legislature. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I do contend that if there is any type of tax increase, it'll be extremely difficult in an election year. The other aspect of that is I foresee that we try to bring back the bill that was vetoed by the governor last year in regards to decoupling from the federal government, because as I said, Kansas is only one of 7 states that has not decoupled from the regulations of the federal tax code that was implemented a couple years ago. So I foresee that coming. And then obviously the big item that's going to be on my plate is the budget. We're still going to have to be addressing a lot of issues. One of the issues that we actually have a legislative budget committee meeting, and I'm the chairperson of that. It's a joint meeting between the House Appropriations and Senate Ways and Means. And one of the things that we did address with Walt Hill, actually with High Plains Mental Health, is in regards to KVC. And the issue that is come around in regards to that facility. I will say that when we were having the discussion with the Legislative Budget Committee and members of the department, and also with Walt, he was there because we were doing a briefing on the mental health tour that we, as I mentioned, conducted it in the month of September. We were getting conflicting information on what we were told on the tour and what we were being told in Topeka. And so they're actually going back and seeing exactly what is the reason as to why KVC is closing the acute care portion of that facility and making them all PRTF beds. Like I said, when we were questioning them, both my counterpart in the Senate, Senator Carolyn McGinn, she and I were questioning them pretty hard because, like I said, we were getting conflicting information from what we found out on the tour. So I can definitely make sure that we have an update because we're supposed to be getting more information from them as to the real rationale of closing that acute care facility with KVC. But the budget is also going to be a very topical item. You may have read that, I shared the portion of 63% of the budget goes to K through 12 education and higher ed. The Board of Regents has asked for almost a $96 million increase in spending to the higher education within the state of Kansas. Now, that's all the facilities, so that's not just your Regent University schools, that's also your community colleges, your technical schools. But still, at the same point, a $96 million ask is a pretty hefty lift. One thing we, and I've expressed this to university personnel and administrators when I've been talking to them, and I said, we might be able to look at deferred maintenance on universities, because all of our universities across the state of Kansas and our community colleges have a number of buildings that have been subject to deferred maintenance for many years. But I just don't see the ability for the legislature to pass $96 million increase beyond the about $35 million that we increased last year. So that's going to be one of the asks. Also, since we did conduct that mental health tour throughout the state of Kansas, we'll be looking at mental health issues throughout the state of Kansas. And I have to say, being on that tour is very eye-opening, especially what some of the children in this state are subjected to when they go to these facilities, what the families have to endure. And so that's going to be an issue that we're going to be having quite a bit of discussion in as well. Other than that, I mean, I think I pretty much gave a briefing of where the stated budget is currently at, where I see it foregoing in the next legislative session. So right now I'd be open to any questions that you might have.
Any changes on the hemp project you want to talk about?
There has been some very drastic changes in regards to the hemp project. When we passed the initial bill in 2018, it was an industrial hemp research program, which was under the confines of the 2014 U.S. Farm Bill, and that's what we were acting under. Then when the 2018 Farm Bill passed, after we had passed the legislation in the 2018 legislative session, then it changed to where it could be changed to commercial hemp. So then we had to change in 2019 the statute language that we passed in 2018 to be compliant with the new federal guidelines with the 2018 Farm Bill. So that is posed some problems, some challenges. One of the things that we try to do in the industrial hemp program is kind of mirror it off of the state of Kentucky. There was no state allocation given by the state of Kansas to the Department of Ag to administer this program. So the only thing that we were able to do was to have that be regulated and funded by a fee structure. Now, some of the individuals thought that the fees were a bit high, and I was one of those that actually kind of thought that myself. But we had to fund the program. So that we mirrored that off of the state of Kentucky. Then in the commercial hemp program, we're reevaluating those fees, and we're seeing how we can bring those fees down to where we can have increased hemp production within the state of Kansas. One thing that I will say, you know, when we were advocating for the bill and I spoke in favor of it in the House Ag Committee, there was a lot of naysayers saying that this would not generate any type of economic development. It would just be, you know, another crop that the agriculture community would be able to plant and to harvest. And what we're finding out is that there has been a predominant component with economic development. In fact, in my home county of Russell County, we just welcomed and had a ribbon cutting for Mechanized Concepts of Kansas that actually moved their facility from Utah to Russell because of our hemp laws. So we have seen quite a bit of economic development activity in regards to hemp. We approved in the growing season of 2019, which was falling under the legislation of 2018, we approved probably about 600 hemp producers to grow. One of the things that we found out is that if you're a farmer, you found this out yourself, if you're growing, you know, planting milo or wanting to go in and cut wheat, is that we had a very wet season this last spring and early summer. And so that was a hindrance for a lot of the hemp producers to plant the hemp. So we're not seeing as many acres that were approved that actually hemp was grown on just because of the weather that we had in late spring and early summer.
Commissioners, questions?
No questions, Troy. Just
Justin?
sounds like you got your work cut out for you.
As we do every year.
Yep,
There's always challenges.
that's great. You're serving on all them committees. We appreciate that. Destin,
Yeah,
question?
the Appropriations Committee, obviously, chairing is a great setup for you and for us out in western Kansas to have you in that. Only question I had from it is how you feel about the control of the budgets at 63% and how the Supreme Court seems to be taking away one of the big powers of the reason why we vote for state representatives, which is the power of the purse. How you feel about that? How you feel about Supreme Court nominations, things of those nature? I feel like, from my perspective, I feel like the Supreme Court in Kansas doesn't really reflect the populace of Kansas in terms of their leanings on some of these issues, but more than anything, I would like the control of being able to vote for our representatives and being able to hold them accountable to spending and things like that, because as of right now, I feel like you guys kind of come back with your hands tied and say, here's what we were told we had to do. So what do you
Well,
feel like
and I thank you for the question. In some cases, it does feel like there is a branch of government that is trying to dictate to two other branches of government, because it's not only the legislature, it's also the executive, that we weren't putting enough money in K through 12 education. However, when I spoke to superintendents in my district, the amount of dollars that the plaintiffs were wanting in the court case that you're referencing to, the Gannon case, no superintendent said we needed that much money. Now, could they use additional dollars? Well, yes, everybody can use additional dollars, and they will use it to the best of their ability. But the dollar amount that they were requesting, even to them, was astronomical. When you are trying to put together a budget, and when we do the budget process, the governor submits her budget in the beginning of January. It's dissected in our research department. We have 6 legislative budget committees that meet, and then they go through all the agencies under their particular committee and question the department heads. If there's any additional dollars that they're wanting to ask for, they question as to why and where's it going to come from. And then those budget chairmen then report back to the Appropriations Committee, and we make our final changes to that. The one thing that has happened the last few years in regards to education spending is the Education Budget Committee had solely taken on itself education funding. That never rolled back up to the Appropriations Committee. It was implanted into the final budget bill, but it was voted completely separate in the chamber of the House and the Senate. So when you're trying to put a budget together and your biggest piece is extracted to another committee, and then it comes back later after it's been negotiated on the House floor and then the Senate and then in conference, and then you got to roll it back into the budget, it makes it different when we go into conference. Because that is when I go in with my vice chairman, my ranking Democrat, with the Senate chairman, vice chair, and ranking Democrat, and then we got to hash out the differences between the House and the Senate. And that's where it ends up being somewhat challenging, and because that portion was already decided on. And we have increases every year for the next 5 years. And like I said, we ended this year with $1.1 billion. Next year, a little under $700 million, and it's because those increases are starting to go up. That's why in 2023 we find ourselves underwater like we did in 14, 15, 16, and 17. And it was because we could not touch education funding because of the court cases that were transpiring during that time. Now, if we come to 2023 and nothing is adjusted and changed, do we cut education funding? We could, but I guarantee you we'll have another lawsuit. In regards to your other question, in regards to the nomination of Supreme Court justices, I said this back in my election in 2012. I have voted that way. I supported the nomination of the governor making the nomination, and then it going to the Senate for confirmation, very similar to what goes on on the U.S. federal level. We do that with the department heads. I think we could do that with the state Supreme Court. However, those bills, because it has to go to a constitutional amendment change, we were not able to get the 2/3 in the House or the Senate in order to move that into a vote of the people to make that change. Many questions arise at that point. They're saying, well, what if there's a justice that retires while you're out of the legislative session and the governor makes an appointment or a nomination, and then how does the Senate come back? Well, you just call a special session. And they go and they vet that nominee, and they go to the Senate, and then they vote on the confirmation. Now, that could open up some other things, because when you open a special session, you got to have the Senate and the House in there. But I've always been in favor of having basically a nominating process very similar to the U.S. federal government.
I'd agree with you. I think just so everybody knows, it kind of gets in the weeds of how the state government works, but I believe it's the Kansas Bar Association that gives the governor a certain number of candidates to choose from, and from there they have to try and decide. Well, if you immediately took out, the idea of an election to the governor from the process and just gave him a few candidates, it's partially why we have the look of the court that we have, I think. So, but I appreciate that. That's just something that's been on my mind. I figured you would be able to weigh in on a little better for me.
Well, the thing, when we had the special committee on education finance that I served on last year, education finance and the fight between the legislature and the Supreme Court has been going on for almost 60 years. It's nothing new. What has transpired in the last 20 years or 25 years is that the Supreme Court seems to be making the decisions over the legislature. The legislature changed the makeup of Supreme Court justices back in the 60s. They also, and that carried through, and then it just seemed like within the last 2 decades, we've been seeing a more empowered Supreme Court.
Very good.
Anything?
Thanks for coming.
Bill, you got anything? Want to ask Troy? No? Okay.
One thing that I would probably say I need some information from all of you is, obviously, in the transportation discussions that we're having discussions about this bypass around Hayes. And actually, I was at the Fort Hays State homecoming game Saturday night, and I was talking with individuals from the university, and they have some concerns because you have access points for Fort Hays State University that would be on that bypass. And so I would probably need some information from you in the future exactly how we want to do the planning with that bypass that goes across the west part of Hayes.
That's interesting, because nothing is changing for the university in terms of access. Not a single thing. So,
well, I'm thinking they're worried about increased traffic flow, and then there may be some access issues because right now they're on that road now, anyways.
yeah,
I think they're concerned about increased traffic.
I understand the increased traffic flow, but the access issues, nothing's changing for them. So,
No. It was a concern that was brought up to me.
okay.
Good.
Well,
Thank
if
you, Troy, for being here.
All right. You got me.
we
Yes.
could touch base, and I could certainly talk to whomever brought that up. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks again, Troy.
All right. Thank you.
Next item, Conservation District, Sandy Scott.
I'm turning it over.
Or Sandy's turning it over. She's using her power to delegate.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Brett Schmidt. I'm with the Board of Supervisors with the Conservation District, Ellis County Conservation District. We are looking at partnering with the Division of Conservation to bring in a new position into Hayes. We brought Steve Frost with us. He's from the Department of Ag, Division of Conservation, just to explain a little bit about this position. And I'll have you go ahead.
Thank you very much, Brett. And I have a couple of handouts for the commissioners. I'll just pass them out real quick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening or afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and I do promise to be very brief. Again, my name is Steve Frost. I'm the administrative manager for the Division of Conservation within the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I think I'll have a hard time beating Representative Waymaster's presentation and all the interesting facts that he gave, but one thing I did notice is that I'm actually part of the 0.2% of the state budget that he referred to earlier in his talk. So it's nice to know that you're not part of the 63% problem, at least. And interesting also that agriculture being the #1 industry in the state of Kansas, we're really getting a very small part of the budget to help support that in terms of everything that is going on. And so that's just part of what I'd like to visit with you about. I'd really like to spend some time talking about the economic benefits that conservation practices and conservation funding brings into the county, but that will have to maybe wait for another time. As has been mentioned, I'm actually here to visit about a new project that the state is asking Ellis County Conservation District to undertake. This is not something that they approached us about, rather the other way around. And in all honesty, I think that the Board of Supervisors there has a little bit of concern in bringing this up for the reason that possibly it could be perceived by the commissioners as being something that could affect their budget. And so I just want to speak to that real briefly and kind of let you know what this is actually about in that way. So the Department of Agriculture has been working for many, many years with both the federal government and local entities such as the Ellis County Conservation District. They're doing a very good job, and what we like to pride ourselves on is the partnership effort that is going on between the federal, state, and local entities. The Division of Conservation works with all 105 of the county conservation districts, implementing cost share that comes from the state budget, and we coordinate together in programs that benefit both landowners of urban as well as the rural communities. And this is another one of those type of cooperative endeavors that I think has the chance to benefit both people here in town as well as out in the community and in the region at large. In essence, what we're talking about is taking some funding that we've received from the federal government and adding 4 new positions in the state. 3 of those would be what are called agricultural or wetland easement specialists. The other one is what's called a statewide soil health specialist. And by virtue of placing these positions in key areas that are located next to NRCS area offices, we have the chance to do some of the things that you can see here on this paper. I'll go through somewhat in just a minute or so. By and large, the funding that will be coming from our office, the state office, has been provided to us from the federal government, and we're just passing through the monies to the conservation district. We're not really adding anything to their budget because everything that is going to be coming into them will be going right back out as being paid in salary, benefits, training, travel expenses, and a little bit of an administrative overhead that they'll get for actually administering the contract. And so we've been very successful at doing this because of the very tight budgets that we're all experiencing. We're trying to make do with what we have, and this is one solution that the federal government has taken up in trying to replace or at least place positions in locations where they cannot actually rehire. There are many restrictions that are going on. The state is in somewhat of the very same analogous situation. And I found that this is a very good way to actually get some technical assistance to landowners on the ground in a very quick and efficient manner. It's not really intended to provide permanent employee. By and large, one of the benefits of doing this is that people who either become conservation technicians or these type of specialist positions can develop the ability and experience and the training to get into a career track with NRCS. And some of these employees have been hired into other positions around the state, and that's great. That's what this is for. Again, it's not really meant to just create permanent positions. So this contract that we have, and we're proposing that hopefully the Ellis County Conservation District could undertake placing an easement specialist here that would basically be working in the western third of the state, providing landowners technical assistance with planning, design of wetlands, playas, sometimes referred to as buffalo wallows, if you've ever heard of that before. They're actually very important natural resource features that are out there on the landscape that have been recognized and somewhat abused over the years. So there's a lot of important work that needs to be done. It's very valuable in terms of water conservation and the benefits that can be provided to aquifer recharge. And so, again, the opportunity to do this is something that we hope that you'll somewhat embrace. Again, no cost to you, but we don't want it to be sort of again, the appearance that they're enhancing their budget and don't need your help, because they certainly do need your continued support. With the match that the State Division of Conservation provides in partnership with you to help with their administrative operations. You know, it's a three-way street. There's the county conservation district, the money that the state provides in matching funds to help with the administrative operations, but then also the local agreement that they share with the federal government, the Farm Service Agency, Rural Development, and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and staffing an office here and providing basically free office space. And the way that works kind of is a win-win-win situation. So I don't want to really go on too much longer. I know that you've probably got a lot of business to do, and I did promise to be brief. So let me just point out those four key things there at the bottom of the outline. Again, I mentioned increasing the conservation technical assistance that would be available to all landowners, the farming community, the agricultural community. As Mr. Representative Waymaster mentioned, there are many challenges out there in the agricultural community. Things are always changing. The work is never really done exactly. The changes in the weather, water and wind are erosive forces that will never stop until we find a way to stop them. But actually, with farming practices, changes in machinery and technology, it's an ever-changing game. I think the one very prime example of this is the situation with honeybees. If you've heard about that, they're in real danger, and it's really a challenge for all of agriculture and conservation to address that as far as developing better pollinator habitat. Many things that are going on right here in our own county that I'm sure you're aware of. So number two, providing an enhanced level of service and communication to landowners and understanding the various types of financial cost share assistance that are available through the local and federal levels, such as EQIP, and assist in maintaining contract reviews and compliance for approved contract schedules and practice requirements. And then at number four, as I mentioned, developing those kind of position and career tracks for people that have the opportunity to get into work with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So with that being said, commissioners, I'd be ready to answer a question if you have them, and to stand down if you do not.
Sounds like a good program you're trying to put in place.
When is this going to take place?
I'm sorry?
When will this take place?
2020.
Well, hopefully as soon as possible, maybe as early as in November. We would be recruiting and trying to place a specialist here in the office if everything works out, and it's going pretty well so far.
Maybe this question better for Brett, does our local office have space for an additional person?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this position would be housed, currently the proposal is to be at the NRCS office. That would be one of the direct supervisors would be with NRCS, so they do have space available there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes, Sandy.
To the area office.
Yes, sorry. NRCS area office,
They
yeah.
won't be housed in our building. They'll be housed in the area office.
Okay,
Dustin, any questions?
No, seems like a great thing.
yeah.
Steve, appreciate you coming. Thank you very much. You too, Brett.
Thanks,
Sandy, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Next item on the agenda, Ellis County Fire Department promotion and appointments. Mr. Darren Myers.
lost the whole entire packet. Darren Myers, Ellis County Fire and Emergency Management. I'm here tonight for a couple different topics. The first one is to fill a semi-vacant position that we have. We have one of the captains on Company 5 here in town. Took a different job with DCP Midstream, and his commitment to that job as well as to the department have kind of switched. So he was asking to step down out of his leadership role as a captain back to a firefighter. And so we opened the position up, and as you can see in the packet, had 8 firefighters apply for the lieutenant's job that would be vacated if the lieutenant got promoted to captain. They met, they interviewed, and they gave a suggestion. And at this point, we would like to have the commission approve and appoint John Vaughn as the captain and Matt Lyon as the new lieutenant.
Guys, any questions?
No questions.
I don't think we have to make a motion for that, do we? Nope. You guys all good with that?
Looks good to me. I trust your judgment. Looks good.
Take care of it.
Okay. I will, if they can attend next week or next month at our new employees, I'll have them come in at that point.
Okay, you want to tell us about your donation?
Also, as a result of Jared Shelton, working with DCP Midstream, his area office when he was out of town doing some training, asked if there was any local projects that he would be interested in asking for money for to support. And with being a part of the department, he asked if he could have $1,000 to help fund a RIT pack. Basically, a RIT pack is to help tie into a self-contained breathing apparatus that firefighters wear. And that RIT pack would tie into them if they were ever to collapse, fall, and they need rescued. That RIT pack would tie into their breathing system, give them additional amount of air. So that way the RIT team, Rapid Intervention Team, would be able to successful or have more time allowed to give that person more air to breathe while they try to evacuate them out of the danger area. The last time I got a price quote for that, because they've been wanting one for quite some time, it's just not high on the priority list. Estimated price was about $950. So by the time we actually narrow it down, it may be a little bit more. So there may be a little bit of cost to the fire department, but anything of any sufficient value that will impact our budget. So I just want to bring
Sounds
that
good.
to you, make sure I was allowed to accept the donation.
Well, I think
Absolutely.
I think nobody's going to object, are you guys? Didn't think so.
Sounds good. Short and
Thanks,
sweet.
Darren.
Thank you.
Next item, elected officials pay plan. County Administrator Philip Smith Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the Commission's work session on October 1st, we talked a little bit about the situation that we find ourselves in currently as a result of the way that our pay plan is structured and the elected officials and the potential for having new elected officials coming on in about a year. And talked about the need to get some direction from the commission for what to include in the elected official salary resolution for 2020 that we'll be bringing back to you in December for adoption. At that time, the commission asked for some information, and so I have provided the information along with a number of different potential options, and would be happy to answer questions and look forward to commission direction on this topic.
Butch, Destin, you want to go first?
I can start on it. Appreciate the packet. Phil is really comprehensive here as far as different ideas and different directions we could go with this. As of right now, I would say that I'm leaning towards the idea of abandoning the pay scale and adjusting the salaries based on a percentage and making sure that we're up to par with our peers and things like that. As I went through the pay scale and looked at peer counties, I obviously there were a few things that I saw that I think were obvious discrepancies with Ellis County from some of the counties, but others really close matches, and some places where it seems like we're competitive on most and maybe not real competitive on others to me. That being said, the part of the reason why I think that we should go that way is I don't think we should be tying elected officials' tenure on the job to their pay, only because I think that incentivizes people to stay in positions possibly longer than they normally would, and or not incentivize other people to get involved. So from my perspective, I like the idea of us setting a salary, adjusting based on, you know, cost of living increases that we give to our employees, and not making an incentive one way or another for our taxpayers to not want an incumbent, and or to not want people to you know, run for these positions. I don't know how you guys felt about that. I did start putting together numbers of what I thought might be fair on some of the positions, and I guess we can talk about that. But maybe you guys had different opinions on it.
Hang on one second, let's see what Butch has to say.
Okay.
Well, I agree quite a bit with you, Dustin, except I'm looking at the bottom one a little more.
Okay.
And you said a lot of the same thing. You want to take them off the pay scale and then set salaries based on some percentages or cost of living and that sort of thing. Both of those are somewhat saying the same thing. I think the bottom one just gives us a little bit more leeway there.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's probably a mix of those two ideas of kind of what I'm saying. You know, I think if we can pan down kind of where we want to be on each one of them, maybe discuss where we think we're at comparative to peer counties and stuff like that as we go here, that would help us decide whether or not we think we're where we need to be at, or maybe too low and not attracting what we want, or whatever.
Which that basically combines the one you just said and the one you just said, and that's what I was looking at too. I mean, it's, I think, look at a percent more than just totally, so we're not, like I say, if you're an incumbent or a non-incumbent, if that's what it's based on.
Yeah, I hate to incentivize or disincentivize either way, but I think if I thought an incentive should be there, it maybe should be for more people to run, not less people to run, and give our voters more access to options. But
You want to, is it okay if he goes through his percents?
Sure, absolutely.
Go ahead, Justin. You
okay, we can
start
just
and I'll
kind of, so the first page I have is Register of Deeds.
Correct.
And it seems like the biggest issue we have here, Phil, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is with Register of Deeds and, or no, sorry, it's not Register of Deeds, it's Clerk and Treasurer, that we have kind of a discrepancy with what most counties, okay. So Register of Deeds, you know, I believe when we looked at it at a 95% of average, on the abandoning pay scale one, that was coming in at $60,279.03. Right now we are currently paying 54.
Midpoint's 53. I mean, we're already above midpoint. But,
Yeah, see, this is the one where I think, you know, I would be, possibly we need to rehash this. I would really like to look at the Evergreen study and why the midpoint on this and where we were at did that, or maybe Phil, you can allude, because that's the issue here, right? Is they came in a bit lower than where we were at on their, or lower than most of our peer counties based on this office. Is that the issue?
Okay, well, a couple of different things. I can explain why why this office is above the midpoint. That I can explain.
Okay.
I don't have a good explanation for
The Evergreen.
what counties Evergreen looked at, and you also have to remember the Evergreen study was 5 years ago now, so they may have looked at very similar counties at that time, and just those counties may have made adjustments that we haven't made.
Okay.
As far as why the Register of Deeds is above the midpoint, again, we've placed the elected officials on the pay scale, and the pay scale is a graduated scale. So as you go up the scale, I know I'm going down, but as you get a higher number on the scale, which is towards the bottom of the scale, it widens out. So there are actually more steps in a pay grade for a higher pay grade than there are lower pay grade. So the Register of Deeds has fewer steps in her pay grade than what the clerk or the sheriff do. And so there was a point in time, beginning of 2017, when both Mrs. Herzog and Sheriff Harbin had been in their positions for more than 15 years, and so the pay, the implementation of pay plan policy called for both of them to go to step 8, which step 8 is the midpoint in where the clerk's range is, but it's one step above midpoint for the Register of Deeds and one step below midpoint for the sheriff and the county attorney. So I know that's kind of a convoluted answer,
I
but
got
they
you.
both went to the same step. It's just a different place in relation to the midpoint depending on their pay grade.
Gotcha. Well, so my thought on this, guys, is looking at our peer counties. We're obviously we're above 2, below most on this one. This is something where I deviate away a little bit from my extreme conservative nature about most government, and I think if we're going to try to attract good people to these offices, I want to make sure that we're at least in line a little bit with some of these. And, you know, my thought process on this is at least a bump to, say, the 56,000 range is what I have. I don't know how you guys feel about that. We're at right now, I guess we're at 54,000.
That's how I feel.
56, okay. 56, what'd you have, 6?
I had 56,683.
I feel like a bump in that position is probably good, just in order to attract what we have. And you know, honestly, I think this is probably my best representation of why I think we should somewhat abandon this pay scale structure for elected officials, because it kind of gets us behind the ball game with some of these, and maybe gets us where we're not attracting talent that we should. I don't know how you feel, Butch.
Yeah.
Butch?
Well, I agree a lot with you, what you're saying. My biggest concern I have is still when we look at salaries, whether it be for elected officials or non-elected officials, we're talking about Social Security increases.
Mm-hmm.
And currently this week, it was said it's 1.6% for next year.
That's an approximation, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how much we want to deviate from that for elected officials as opposed to non-elected officials. We do have a budget we have to maintain,
Right.
and there's uncertainty in the revenue for that budget.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that too. Let's skip past that one. I think that this could be something that we could also all think on after we talk about it, and then
We
come
don't have
back
to
with
decide
numbers.
tonight. This
Yeah.
will give us stuff to work on with Phil.
So next is county clerk position. This one actually, you know, kind of hit down, you know, mid range. Looks like current 62.7. You know, I thought this one was actually one where we were kind of hitting where I would like to hit for clerk, but I thought 63-ish was about where I thought this one should be. And then, like I say, with an adjustment, if there's a increase in cost of living, come 2021 budget. I don't know how you guys feel about 63 on that one.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too.
I'm fine. I had 64, but 63 is fine.
Okay. Treasurer's office. This is one that I thought we might be a little low on, especially as we see how much a treasurer can save us with, you know, good practices and things like that. Right now, what we're at 59.3. with the study, let me pull that back. With the studies at 60. The thing I noticed was a little bit, I mean, it's kind of back and forth on whether or not the treasurer and the clerk pay structure. With the treasurer, there's a lot more control to our budgets and a lot more control to save us, an incentive to save us money. Anyway, I came in right around like 63 on this one. I don't know how you guys feel on that.
I had 62.
Yeah, I could go with either.
Okay, so somewhere 62 to
62 and a
63.
half.
That's fine.
62.5. Kind of make that as a bitch point, 62 and a half.
Place to start.
Yep. Next was Sheriff's Office. This is the one that was hard for me with comparison counties and stuff like that. I was trying to think of the job of sheriff and where we should be at. I have 85 on this one, bump of about $1,000 to what we're paying now. But, you know, sometimes I look at outliers like Finney. I imagine a Finney County Sheriff has quite a bit more to deal with than an Ellis County Sheriff. So sometimes I was just kind of eliminating outliers and trying to find a mix of the others to come up with these numbers.
I had 86. Which, what do you have?
85.
85 it
So
is.
we're going to be somewhere in that range, yeah. The next one's probably the one we're going to have the most discussion about, county attorney. As we've talked with county attorney a couple times on his budget and things like that, you know, I've noticed we're relatively low on the pay scale for that. The thing that I noticed, and it was something that I didn't expect becoming a county commissioner, was the idea that we're hiring a lot of attorneys right out of law school, because our county attorney gets full authority over their budget for pay, and we have to offer them much more than we're even paying them to run the ship, to you know, to come in as just a prosecuting attorney, not the actual county attorney. So it was one where I saw the biggest jump or increase, but I you know, where I came in at was about 92,000. Currently, we're at 84.
Butch?
Well, I wouldn't want to go over 90.
Okay.
I was at 89.
Okay. You know, and that's the thing. I think the nice thing with this is that I believe future commissions can take these numbers and see what the job market looks like at that point. I think 90 is a good point where it's, especially with our benefits package and stuff, it's still a good job for an attorney, and obviously can be a job that an attorney can do other things besides just that. It just seems we're pretty full time with the number of people that we have and what
Sure.
we're looking at. So.
I was just looking at Barton County and McPherson County is what I was looking at.
I know, yeah.
Where I came up with 89.
Yeah, and once again, I kind of threw Finney out as an outlier. I actually went and looked at some crime statistics for Finney compared to us, and that guy or gal has way more job to do with homicide and violent crime and things like that. I mean,
And Barton County isn't a cakewalk either.
Yeah. And that was the hard thing with this, was I was trying to get an idea or basic idea of the job, the job at hand and stuff like that.
I was
but-
surprised at Seward County that they pay their county attorney that much, and on the other side, their treasurer, that was on the other end of the spectrum, and sheriff.
Yeah. So maybe we set, our bench point, you said about 88 and
I had 89, Butch had no more than 90, and you had 92.
so maybe we'll come in around 90. I think just
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Butch is fine with that.
90,000 seems like it's an increase of about $500 a month in the position, so.
Yep.
Okay, and then what was the one, we had one that we hadn't really come to an agreement on, that would have been, at register of deeds. What were we at, 56.5, 56.8 or something?
No, I think Dean had 56,683.
56,683.
I did. If you say so, Butch, hang on, let me go back there. That's what I had.
I actually wrote that too, so, what do you call that? You want to call it 56.7 for ease of number, 56.7?
Sure.
Sure, works for me.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind too is the, at the treasurer's office in December, she gets to write a check out of the motor vehicle tax fund every year as a bonus.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember the exact amount last year, but it was, I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't remember.
And is that represented in this at all, Phil?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
these are just base salaries. So the clerk, for example, also serves as the election official, and there's a separate stipend for that. And then the treasurer also does write from the motor vehicle fund. And you mentioned the possibility of an attorney having outside work. I think the sheriff and the register of deeds are pretty much, the
Here.
number is what it is, but
Okay.
the others
I'm
have.
going to do sideline work.
I suppose they could, but it's not typical in those professions.
And where were we at on, so we were at about 63 on clerk, is that what I had seen here?
63, yes.
63 even.
And 62.5, is that what we said, or 65 on treasurer?
62.5,
Okay.
that's what I have.
Yeah, I think 62.5, it's a little increase in pay and like I said, that was one that I thought, hey, there's a lot of incentive in that department where they can find us and create some
That
good.
bonus they write themselves is pretty healthy too.
Okay. But I like this structure a lot better. I think it incentivizes good elected officials, but it also doesn't create, it lets the people of the county decide on incumbency for the benefits that incumbency naturally has, but doesn't disincentivize people from wanting to run for the offices. And
Sure.
I think we meet a good base level with our peer counties here, and
Definitely for hiring, if nothing else, and attracting people.
yeah, exactly.
So y'all are good with them numbers, Butch?
That give you
You're
good
with them numbers?
direction, Phil, and
You're good with them numbers?
I'm good with them, yes.
Gives Phil direction to go with? Yes, sir, he says. Anything else, Dustin?
and these would be effective 2021 budget year, right? If we sign the resolution. or
2020,
Be 2020 budget year, okay. Okay.
correct. We'll move on. County Administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no report this evening.
I feel like we ought to ask Bill Jeter if he has a report because he's here. Bill Jeter, you got a report?
Bill Jeter, County Councilor. An update on tax foreclosure. Still waiting for certificates of title
Okay,
from both abstract companies, and I think those probably are forthcoming
okay.
shortly.
Great, thanks for
We'll-
joining us
then
this
we'll get-
evening.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Then I'll get to work on that.
Okay,
Then we've got a couple of executive sessions, and I've given Commissioner Schleier motions.
County Commission reports in. Butch,
I have no report.
Dustin?
And no report from me.
I really don't have much either, other than they did get the final number from RPM Speedway on the big race they had, 258 cars, which is the largest they've ever had in the 11 years of RPM Speedway.
Very good.
So great turnout, and we're still waiting on the number of states, but I think it was 15 different states that showed up, and Canada. So, do you guys get any reports about it or anything from here from anybody? No? No?
I tell you what, when I drove by there, it was amazing the number of trailers and cars in there, and the economic benefit that came from that. There's so many people that aren't involved in the racing at all that don't even see the total number of people that come in for that event. So great job by them. I really was just amazed. I don't know where people actually parked to spectate because it looked like there were so many places for
Down and over the
race
hill.
cars. Yeah,
And plus, they had shuttles running all 3 days.
yeah, I would think
Shuttles
you'd have
running.
to.
In fact, our sheriff's department was called out to have a couple vehicles move that they thought they could just leave them set on the road and go to the races.
Oh, great.
So they had to be moved. But no, it was a great turnout. And like I say, they did a great job. Glenn Unrein and staff out there did an awesome job. And he said it's the largest one they've ever had in 11 years. And they're already planning for next year. So very, very well done.
Make a point to go out and watch next year.
Yep, you need to go. It's nonstop from the time they start till it's over. It's nonstop. It's
Very good.
Very well organized. Moving on, executive session.
I move the Board of County Commissioners recess to executive session for 10 minutes for attorney-client privilege to discuss pending litigation. And those in attendance would be Administrator Phil Smith-Haynes and Counselor Bill Jeter.
I second that.
Donna, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries 3-0. We shall return. Did you say 15 minutes?
10.
10 minutes. 10 minutes. All right,
Okay.
next executive session.
I make a motion, the Board of County Commissioners recess to executive session for non-elected personnel matter regarding the transition plan. Those in attendance would be Administrator Phil Smith-Haynes and Counselor Bill Jeter.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 How long, I'm
20
sorry?
minutes.
20.
20 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. By the way, Bill, you look nice.
trying to find some.
They keep running away on you.
No action, and we will adjourn at 6:43.